Hello listeners, welcome back to your interesting channel. All living organisms from bacteria to man obtain their nourishment from the atmosphere to be able to perform their activities that distinguish them from inanimate world. The plants obtain from the atmosphere only some mineral nutrients and few simple inorganic compounds like carbon dioxide and water. Making the use of solar energy, the plants fix CO2 during the process of photosynthesis to synthesize simple sugars like carbohydrates. As such, plants are not dependent on the atmosphere for their organic food, comprising carbohydrates, fats, proteins, and vitamins, and therefore they are referred to as autotrophs. Some bacteria can also synthesize their food making use of solar energy or chemical energy of some inorganic compounds and are referred to as photoautotrophs. The animals, fungi, and most bacteria, on the other hand, are incapable of synthesizing their own food and therefore must obtain it from the atmosphere. All such organisms are called heterotrophs. As we all know, the food is the source of energy. Why do we eat? Partly to satisfy the sense of taste, but mainly for the production of energy required to carry out the various activities that characterize our life. Indeed, it is energy that rotates the wheel of life. The food that generates energy upon complete oxidation in the body is form of carbohydrates, fats and proteins. Of course, the diet has to be supplemented with a proportionate amount of minerals, vitamins and water. We'll briefly discuss the structure and the source of foods. The first and most important one is carbohydrates. What are the basic sources where we can get carbohydrates? Potatoes, rice, wheat, maize, bananas, sugar, jaggery. These are compounds consist of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and they have hydrogen and oxygen in the same ratio as in water, which is 2 is to 1. Hence, the general formula of carbohydrate would be CHCN, which is H2O of N. Carbohydrates are broadly grouped under three main categories: monosaturates, desaturates, polysaturates. So let's talk about monosaturates. These are very simple, simplest sugars consist of three or more carbon atoms. For example, ribose, deoxyribose, glucose, fructose, galactose. These are like monosaturates. If we see desaturates, these are formed by the union of two monosaccharides units. Example, maltose, which is a mix of glucose plus glucose. Lactose, which is a mix of glucose plus galactose. Sucrose, which is a mix of glucose plus fructose. If we see polysaccharides, these are found by the union of large number of monosaccharide units, maybe 300 to 1000. Examples: starch, glycogen, which is animal starch, cellulose. These are some examples of polysaccharides. So we have talked about carbohydrates. If we see, the next one is fats. What are the basic sources of fats? Butter, ghee, oils, groundnuts, almonds. These are compounds consist of C, H, O, but chemically totally different from those of carbohydrates. They are insoluble in water but soluble in fat solvents such as acetone, benzene, and chloroform. Fats are all esters of glycerol with fatty acids. Glycerol is trihydric alcohol, that is possessing 3 hydroxyl OH. Thus, these three molecules of fatty acid can react with each of the OH grouping of glycerol, forming triglyceride or fat. For example, three molecules of butyric acid, which is C3H7COOH, react with glycerol to form the fat called glycerol tributyrate. Similarly, palmitic acid, which is C15H31COOH, and stearic acid, which is C17H35COOH, form glyceryl triplamide and glyceryl stearate separately. We talked about carbohydrates, fats. Let's see about proteins. The sources of proteins are milk, eggs, fish, meat, pulses, soya bean, and legumes. Chemically, proteins are strikingly different from other foods as they are composed of C, H, O, N, usually and also S. The complete hydrolysis of proteins yield about 20 different amino acids. Thus, it is concluded that proteins are solely made up of amino acids as there are no other products of hydrolysis. Amino acids are chemical compounds that contain both acidic carboxyl and basic amino. The amino acids of a protein are united to one another by their respective carboxyl and amino groups, forming a peptide bond. With the repetition of peptide bonds between different amino acids, a protein is also described as polypeptide chain. These foods are complex chemical compounds and are too large to be absorbed by the cells of the small intestine. Therefore, the body improves some method by which these compounds are broken down into their simplest constituents called nutrients. This is achieved by certain active ferments or substances somewhat comparable to inorganic catalysts which are called enzymes. Let's see about enzymes in our next video. Thank you listeners.